platforms are not all the same. We have seen this with a number of definitions that highlight different nuances. Nonetheless, as complex as the world of platforms may seem, with all these definitions, we are still talking about models that simplify reality. What do I mean? That reality is much more complex than the definitions we gave. And to understand this, let's talk about two typical examples of platform, Facebook and Apple. Facebook was founded by Mark Zuckerberg and started with a social network at the Harvard University in February 2004. In the beginning, like almost all social networks, Facebook was not a real platform compared to the definition we provided before. Basically, there was only one group of users, Harvard students, who would send and receive messages. Sure, they are senders and receivers, and they could be considered two-sided. But the role changes all the time, and the cross-site network externalities, in this case, are simply direct network externalities. As the number of users increases, the value of a network increases, exactly like for other network assets like the telephone. The transition to a two-sided platform was quick. In mid-2004, advertising appeared, and already that year exceeded $380,000 in revenues. As the platform grew, the type of users changed. There were no longer only individuals, but also companies that wanted to reach potential customers through their pages, becoming another transactional site. Over the years then, Facebook has further expanded. The marketplace was launched in 2016, after an ineffective experiment almost 10 years earlier, allowing anyone to offer and search for used products. Also, as Facebook dating feature was added, announced in 2018 and released globally into 2020, taking up in part the Tinder model to allow people to get to know each other and perhaps start a relationship. In other words, we can see how a purely orthogonal platform with only advertisers has added a number of transactional subjects over time, like business companies wanting to sell their products or individuals wanting to start a relationship. Within this framework, however, we can't forget about the orthogonal actors, often more difficult to identify. Over time, Facebook learned to use data to offer enhanced and incredibly targeted advertising, and a number of analytic providers jumped on the platform offering to analyze the data collected by the social network for other companies. This story shows how, in the same reality, different definitions of platform can coexist, giving rise to an hybrid platform. In Facebook, we find both transactional and orthogonal relationships, and the latter both in terms of client as a target and client as a source. This further complexity shows us the infinite potential of platforms, which can evolve according to very different logics and paths, becoming more and more complicated organizations, but always oriented to exploit the idle assets they create during their growth. In this complexity, the various definitions and the differences between them become particularly useful in order to be able to identify more clearly the links and the types of relationships between the sites and especially between the platform and the sites. In the case of Facebook, we see how the platform is supported economically mainly by advertisers with a logic of enhanced advertising, and how it retains percentages of other transactions, such as those of a marketplace. At the same time, a second value capturing strategy is clearly in place. Towards all sites, the platform offers services, and all transactional sites generate data that go to increase the value of a platform for orthogonal customers. With this kind of representation, we can clearly see what the various surrounds of an hybrid platform are, and how they are involved leveraging on a multi-sided strategy. But there's more. In May 2007, Facebook announced a software platform developers could use to create apps, opening the platform to third parties. This added another side, developers. One of the most famous is Zynga, the developer of Farmville, that has definitely contributed to the success of this operation and of the platform itself. In a way, we can see the developers as yet another side that has been added to the platform, leveraging the typical strategy of innovation platforms. This last example shows the hybridization not only of the various types of two-sided platforms, but more generally of different types of platforms. At the beginning, I anticipated that I would talk about two super famous platforms, Facebook and Apple. Well, Apple follows this discourse perfectly, showing us how various types of platforms can coexist in the same company. When defining transactional platforms, we used Apple as an emblematic case to distinguish innovation and transactional platforms. iOS, with its technological components of the iPhones, its technological architecture, and its APIs for external developers, is a typical example of an innovation platform, while the App Store is a typical example of transactional two-sided platform, with the sole purpose of enabling transactions between those who search and those who offer applications. But it doesn't end here. Apple is famous for many things, from impeccable product design to high level of service, not to mention the innovative scope of many of its products. But there is something more than characterize it: the product families, where we can easily find excellent examples of product platform. The iPhone architecture has allowed over the years the development on annual basis of one or more iPhone models as derivative products, maintaining, at least for some generations of smartphones, the same basic architecture, on which to innovate some models or components, making the development process shorter and more effective. This simple example shows us how all types of platforms can be integrated into a single organization, and that the world of platforms is much more complicated than it seems.